Today's date is March 8th, 2022. I am your host, Tom Kaczynski. Welcome to Sunrise in Pineland. Hope you're all doing well. The Lord's blessing be upon you this day and every day, and that your family's doing well today. Don't know what kind of show it's going to be today. I went through the news and I don't know what to tell you. It's the same story. I guess to give you the quick brief of it, right? That we see the Russians continuing their invasion of Ukraine, and it looks like they will succeed here within a month. Before the end of the month, I'd say. It looks like the Ukrainian army's getting surrounded, and that's not surprising to anyone that should happen. And you can see Zelensky starting to moderate some of his tone a little bit and understanding that the Russian terms, which are basically, as best I can understand, the seizure or the independence of Donetsk and Luhansk, however you want to put it, and the recognition of Crimea as independent will be followed. I don't know what's going to happen with those other areas, the land bridge that they want. We'll see how that all plays out. I guess the longer it goes, the more Russia's going to take. But it looks like if a deal is there to be made, it probably should happen in the next few days before. If the Ukrainian government forces Russia to go in and invade into the heart of Mariupol and to go further into Kiev, you would expect the price would be higher, the loss of southern and eastern Ukraine. And Russia's saying at least that they, if they get their denazification and demilitarization, whatever that means, that they'll accept that peace. And will that be permitted? I don't know. I don't think so, but, maybe it will be. We'll see. That's going forward. We see the prices of things continue to rise. The market's a little calmer today, but I saw, interestingly, Royal Dutch Shell Oil saying that they're not going to be buying Russian oil, and Russia's hinting if this doesn't get solved soon, shut down soon, they're going to be shutting down Nord Stream 1, which would be, basically a calamity for oil prices and the economies of the West. At the same time, I've been watching the Freedom Convoy that rolled into Washington, apparently do 2 laps around the Beltway and then get ready to go home. And I know some people get mad at maybe that oversimplification of it, but these people didn't seem to have much of a plan except to hope have something spontaneously appear. And maybe that's why I'm a little quiet today. Trying to figure out what the next moves are for people because, realistically, it seems like the only plays that exist for people who want to see something different at the table right now are go march against the machine and turned into criminals, which, is not great, or two, hope for some foreign power to liberate you by destroying the world, which is a subset, if we're really honest, of wait for the economic collapse to happen. And that's happening. It's interesting reading about inflation and reading about these difficulties of a debt-based system. I've been reading, actually, I'll show you what I'm reading. Give me 1 second. Let me grab the book. So I've been reading this book, which I think is fantastic. I highly recommend it. Actually, Free Green, you'd probably love it too, called Babylon's Banksters: Alchemy of Deep Physics, High Finance, and Ancient Religion by Joseph P. Farrell. And his basic argument, I haven't finished the book, but I've read about half of it, and I will finish reading it in the next day or so. His argument goes a bit like this, that physics and finance follow the same basic rules of a wave theory, that there are ways you can change it, but essentially there's a cycle that runs through the whole thing and that you can anticipate the cycle, and that in fact our whole economic activity is actually structured in response to the cycle of things around us, events on recurring things on recurring intervals, I should say, that are around us. And I guess it had me thinking that, we talk about these options that are here in front of us, and what we need is a revolution in thought. I was just thinking about it, like, because I was reading about Tesla this morning, and everyone finds Tesla interesting. Of course, so do I. And, Tesla, he made the suggestion. I don't know if it's true or not. People argue these things, but he was saying that Farrell was saying, and I forget who he was quoting, but he was talking about the idea that the giant explosion in Tunguska, that some of you will be familiar with. There was supposedly a meteor strike, although there was no crater found, that blew out 500,000 acres of the forest in 1917, was actually something that was a test done by Tesla, or with a technology similar to what Tesla was putting forward, where he basically argued that the inverse of radio was true. And it went a bit like this, and I'm really, keep in mind, physics is not my strong point, even though I'm a ham operator. If radio is where you have a lot of intensity in an antenna to send and activate a wave and send information on it, a carrier wave, which is to say that and just so you know what a carrier wave is, let's say you have a naturally existing wave, a high loopy wave, okay? But you also, at the same time, you modulate it by putting another wave on it, which is to say, so instead of a wave going like this, it will go That's kind of how radio works. What you do is you transpose one wave on top of another wave, and that you use basically the way radio works is you use power. A certain amount of electrical power is put into the wave so that it'll propagate across the surface. And what he's saying in the book is basically that the inverse is true, and this is what Tesla was trying to do, and this is why he did this famous experiment with free electricity. He argued that if you did it right, you could very easily take the energy that was coming out of you could through the use of certain waves and magnetism, you could essentially turn the Earth into a transmitter, and where we would usually think that we need a lot of output. Yeah, Warden Cliff Tower, exactly. So I'm glad. I'm not surprised you know that. Warden Cliff was in Long Island, and in fact, J.P. Morgan sold him out. The financiers were behind the destruction of Tesla and free energy, which is why Westinghouse got involved, and then they eventually converted it into nuclear power, which was something lesser. Hey, let me shout out upstairs because Dana's up now. I didn't know she's up. I hear her beaking, which is her way of saying she's awake. Hi, Lovey, I'm awake, but I'm on the show. Maybe I'll come up in a minute. Anyway, so and Free Green could probably explain this better than I can, but I'm not surprised you know all this. The short version of it is they turned. I'm gonna make you some coffee, dear. Tesla turned the Earth into a transmitter because the same sort of thing was true in inverse, that you could, with a small amount of energy, turn certain waves in other ways where you could literally use the Earth itself as the transmitter if you had the right frequency put into it, because the Earth is a bit like a bell in that sense. It can be, how should I put it? It can be activated, is this is how the theory goes. It can be activated in a way where we are now able to use that to spread energy or messaging or electricity. And Tesla literally, one second, please. Usually I have this stuff clean before I get started, so I apologize. I just need a second to get the coffee going. But Tesla was able to figure out how to basically invert the method, and he imagined, or tested, depending on what you want to believe. One sec. He imagined that you could basically use the Earth to create it into a giant power station or weapon. And in fact, this research was followed up by the Germans, by the Soviets. There's a name by the name of Robert, I think Richtner, if I remember right, or maybe that's not his name. But he ends up going, he was a German scientist, and he ends up down near Bariloche in Argentina. And in fact, the FBI and the paperclip people take a big interest in him because he's working on these technologies. And of course, the bankers take an interest because the whole point Farrell's trying to make. Good morning to everybody, by the way. I can't see you all because I'm at an angle. But good morning. See you, David. Glad to see you here. So his theory went a bit like this, that what the bankers would do is they would suppress the access to free energy. Okay, and Free Green's giving you a better explanation than I can. But the short of it, to give you the gist of it beyond the science of it, because we all know I'm not the science guy, the gist of it was that the whole system of banking and finance basically relies upon the idea that energy is a finite resource. And all of the economics and all of the world and all the slavery and all the servitude models we have are based on the idea that energy is limited and that you don't have a lot of choice. And because energy is limited, things are scarce, and because they have value, we fight one another. And it leads to a world that has a lot of problems. Not that hard for people to understand, I don't think. But Tesla maybe had a chance to have a different world, and it had me thinking that maybe there's a third way solution to this problem of what we do with a world of crazy elites who are destroying us. And part of that was an understanding of how fiat money worked, and part of that was a simple, forgive me, I'm going upstairs into the darkness here to grab the coffee cup from my wife. Good morning, lovey. Okay, I'm just grabbing your coffee cup, and then I'll be back up, or I'll bring it to you when it's done, okay? Okay, so anti what? It might be. We'll have to talk through it later because I'm not good at explaining it, and I'm still reading, and I got like 5 books I have to read, but that's okay. I'll be right back. Okay, so yeah, what I was saying is that If you change the nature, I am not a scientist. We all know this. I do have a basic understanding of certain things. And what I've kind of come to realize is maybe we think about this the wrong way. The whole thing, socially. Society changes in response to inventions. Take electricity as a generality, how much that changed society, or television, or the internet. Maybe the way to beat this system, and we got the people here to do it, I think, because they've already done some of the work, but figuring out a way to popularize and make it available is to figure out how to make some of this free energy possible. And people say, oh, that's crazy. You can't exist in that. We live in a world where there are rules and limitations. Yeah, those are things that are put on us as basically the binds of a slave. And I don't think they're absolutely true. I mean, there are rules and there are behaviors, and that's absolutely, that is the case. But there's always exceptions. And there's always a deeper understanding. I spend a lot of time studying quantum mechanics, studying quantum tunneling, quantum computing. And one thing I realize is the world is weird. And there's always different possibilities playing out at different times. And if we can kind of figure out how to work with those, maybe then we can do something different in this world and not have so many of the unhappy outcomes for which we are so familiar. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about the fight between Russia and Ukraine, and we can talk about the fights with our government, but these people have control because we allow them to be arbiters over us because we have limitations in what we can do. We follow them because we don't have the ability to sustain ourselves. And we talk about sustainability on this program a lot in terms of not some abstract thing where we give power to insane people to say what you can and can't do, but rather in terms of personal empowerment and the ability to start controlling how you live your life. We talk about that from food production. We talk about that from prepping. We talk about that from energy production. And, we have things like, if Free Green was here, he could talk about wood gasifiers and, technologies that were paths not taken. Or, if you went back in time, how the Rockefellers basically kneecapped the idea to use ethanol as a fuel. And mind you, these are still scarce fuels, but at least they were decentralized. So you have a decentralized open system that could be looked at versus a centralized closed system where it's ever putting more pressure and more. And we feel this pressure. We live this pressure, right? And I know this sounds kind of new agey to you, but it's just simple physics. I mean, people put all sorts of fancy words around it. The idea is we have a closed system or an open system, and a closed system will inevitably eat itself to death. And that's what we have. We see a closed system where they let in as little bit as they can. The people who are in charge, suppressing technology, suppressing, options for how we can live, because they don't want us to have freedom. They don't want us to have liberty. They don't want us to have choices in our lives. They don't want us to explore the full potential of what human experience is. They want us to be living in debt servitude so they can control us, use us, and explore whatever they want without the threat, and ultimately unto the point where they will kill us one way or another. And whatever that means, because they'll put us all under an electric grid. I mean, I had a crazy idea this morning, and this is going to sound like a sketch of the stream, but hey, it's how it is. It's this morning. One of the things, let's see, that I was thinking about is we talk about CERN a lot, and people will talk and do videos about CERN and CERN being a portal and CERN being a means by which they're conjuring demons out of the abyss or, whatever they're doing over there, because they're tearing rifts in space and time, and who knows what's coming in. But I had another idea after I was reading about Tesla's experiments out in Long Island at Walden Cliff or whatever it's called, Walden Cliff. Tesla had a trial case because apparently what happened, I mean, Tesla was a Mac daddy. He was trying to hit on J.P. Morgan's daughter, if you believe this story. And J.P. Morgan was insanely rich, but he didn't like that, and eventually he canned him, and Tesla ended up losing the place he had built out there. And so there's this deposition about what are the assets on the property and what he was trying to do. And what he basically said was he had to dig deep into the earth for a lot of these towers. And think of the obelisk, if you want an example of ancient technologies being pulled with this, the Washington Monument, right? That they were building deep into the earth so that they could use the earth and use it as a resonance transmitter. Or if you want to think of the big ELF array, if you want to think of technologies, it's not like this isn't understood. That was built under northern Wisconsin and the UP of Michigan. You can go look it up. It was built in the 70s and 80s. It was supposedly used for submarine communication, but who actually knows? Is this something we build as a larger weapon? And the thing about it was that Tesla was saying, or basically that you could use this to both provide electricity to everyone, but you could actually turn the earth itself into a weapon. And to God forbid, I hate to say this, but if you understand the uses of electricity properly, and you start to understand matter We think of gravity in Newtonian terms as a really heavy object pulling things close to it. In reality, it appears, if Tesla's right, and I hope I'm saying this right, it's actually the opposite. It's, if you think of the world, the universe, as a series of waves interacting, gravity is the tendency of things to get stuck at the bottom of the trough. So if you had a wave that's like, let's just draw it like this, okay? And I had, we'll hold this little top to the shower sprinkler thing. So it will go, what it does is it goes down here, and we say, oh, well, waves shape themselves around gravity, and objects do impact one another, but the key thing is that the wave function, the potential for something, predates the reality of it, right? So what you do is you see that it gets caught in these waves, and what Tesla basically was able to do was start to look at what these waves were doing, and you could anticipate based on certain objects that they'd fall into the waves. So instead of looking at life as objects we are clinging to, instead you think of it as us riding a wave at all times, and that begins to explain things as weird as, quantum physics to astrology, right? And it's not to say that those objects have any supernatural power per se. It's more about the idea that when there are certain interruptions in the wave. For instance, if you have a small object put a bigger one, a big wave goes like this, right? And then when you have like radio waves with frequency modulation, what you're doing is you're constantly changing. You're putting little things like a stock market looks like. And you see this wave in terms of all things, but you see it on certain periodicities, certain intervals. Like he talked about, there was a 54-year interval, certain things happen. Some of you who know the fourth turning know this. And so you begin to realize a lot of understanding the universe. That's why lightning starts from the ground up. Absolutely right? Because the Earth is the transmitter of it, and it's a standing wave that's being recognized in the release of the electricity, right? So you start to understand that we kind of have everything backwards. I'm sorry. We tend to look at physics as object materialism, and really this has been the occult science that we've practiced for 500 years. We kind of hinted on this and come out of Babylon. I can't tell this story well enough to write it. I'm not going to try to. I'm just going to try to explain a thought and let smarter people than me try to run with it. And if you're out there, God bless you. This ain't going to be easy. But the waves are what you have to begin to ride. And if you can begin to manipulate those waves in certain ways and anticipate those waves, it's a node point. Thank you. Very well said. You're much better at the science than I am. Like I said, I am a mere philosopher trying to understand things beyond my pay grade. And that's okay. That's what you gotta do. You gotta challenge your mind. It's important. So I go into all of this not because all of you want to know about the secrets of how to build lasers to destroy the universe, or not because I was going to tell you that literally we could turn the Earth into a Death Star, and they already may have done so. Which actually has me thinking maybe that's what they were trying to do with CERN, that they're building underneath to build this giant resonator. You think of the dish on the Death Star, and then shoot that out there, because what's the purpose of evil? What's the purpose of the demonic? To destroy the world, because it wants to show God that man was a mistake and the world was a mistake, and say, hey, we're going to take this back, and God was the word, and it was the beginning of the voice, and so you want to go ahead and break that wave down to nothingness and see the end of all things. It's audacious. And then you harness humanity, maybe. This is going to sound totally schizo, but maybe the reason why they're trying to electrically change us by putting graphene in us is to use us as conductors, so that as we become one with that system, they can use the quantum potential in each of us to further charge this. I'm probably going too far, and I'm probably going too fast. But we do have choice. And because we have consciousness, whatever mystery that is, good luck trying to explain that one. That's a God-given gift, that we can resist these things. And what we find is that these patterns repeat. It's interesting that if you think of this from a biblical perspective, that Christ literally says that it will be as in the days of Noah. And we talk about that a lot, but we're seeing the same sort of things play around again, that maybe the Atlanteans dealt with. Or that, we saw it in, what should we say, pre-flood times before civilization restored itself somewhat. And you start to see these hints of the pieces that they're going to put in play, and the world they want to have in order, and how they want to resist and have this final battle, and what we can do to resist it. Because, we were also told by Christ we would be able to do miracles as great as he did in many ways. Of course, I'm not saying that we are ever more than Christ, but I'm just simply saying, if Christ says things that are interesting, the churches forget because they're not, able to explain it, because we simplify things to dogma. I think we have to revisit things. I think we have to revisit a lot of things. And what I find myself wondering, and what I find myself thinking amongst our Pinelanders, especially as we have some really talented people, like Free Green, for example, like Aaron, like Tony, and some really good thinkers, the history, who can do the research, like Kinaz, frankly, would be real good at it. We can maybe we can pick up the pieces where they left off, maybe we can earn our freedom the only way anyone ever has, which is to say that we will be able to use a little mutually assured destruction. And here's my crazy idea for the day. And of course, I'm just talking out my backside, but hey, you guys want a show in the morning, and I'm giving it to you. If we understood how to employ these forces, and we put our talents together and we built our own community and said, hey, we're going to give ourselves free electricity and we're going to take care of the needs of our community. And if you come after us, we can go ahead and remove you in an instant. Before you even shoot at us, you'll be gone. Okay, then you have freedom. Then you have separation, and all the threats they can make against you go away. And that's what it is. We can choose a different path, maybe, if we can only be smart enough. And the interesting thing about that pattern is that we're not trying to possess the world. We're trying to understand ourselves. We're trying to do something fundamentally different because, take it from me, I've been a dissident a very long time. I've studied a lot of different systems, and there are pros and cons to different systems, and sometimes they work in certain scenarios and sometimes they don't. And there's lots of promises about ways to redistribute what we have, and every political philosophy basically talks about the best way to divide the cake instead of teaching anyone how to bake something new. So maybe as Pinelanders, we need to build something new. We need to think we'll have to do something different. And I don't know the answer to this. It's just a thought that's popping on the edge of my mind. And I don't have a good solution yet. Or I may not have one. But it does make me think that the things that are possible are so much greater than our ability to accept of what they actually are. And that we need to begin pushing harder into these areas. And I think that what might be needed... Give me 1 second. I'm going to give Dana her coffee. Don't want to have an echo. Here you go, lovey. Love you. I'll be back in a little bit. Okay. The thing that I'm beginning to think is maybe we just need a genius institute. Maybe we need to make Pineland, a little enclave somewhere and figure it out and take care of one another and have these answers. Because if we could do that, we can win. We can stop them. We all know the only reason they get away, and by that I mean the elites, is because they can hurt us. They can bankrupt us. They can jail us. They can corrupt us. They can destroy us. And none of us like them. They take our stuff and say it's for your own good. Because we don't have the ability to resist. Because I hate to say it, and it's an ugly thing, but it is true. In this world, control and statehood is about force and the ability to put it. That's why America, for instance, hasn't had as bad a run as, say, Canada in some ways, different than others. I mean, we get propagandized more, but ultimately there are limits because there's a whole bunch of guns. And yet it's a very small weapon. It's deadly enough individually, but collectively hard to harness. And so maybe what's needed is a new way of thinking of things where you can say, we are walking away and you will let us and you won't stop us, and that we give ourselves a guarantee. And maybe that's where we have to get to. And if you take self-sufficiency to its logical end, beyond the chickens and goats, beyond the boilers and turbines, if you put brilliant minds together who are harmonious with one another. And harmony is important because this is a wave, This is finding a way to connect to the way the universe intended us to be, not to be at odds with it in this rough dissonance that's so horrible to us. Maybe we can realize God's vision for ourselves until Jesus comes to share it more fully by taking care of one another in such a way. And I feel like I'm slowly but surely getting to the point where I've kind of given up with trying to do things in the old political sphere. I am very good at politics. I'm very good at it. I'm tempted. There are days, I've never do this because I wouldn't put my wife through it. But, I would even say, I'd love to run for, governor up here and just say, this is true and that's true. And the media would say horrible things about me, but I'd make interesting friends. I just don't have the energy for the drama. But it wouldn't change anything as fun as it would be. And that's what I've realized. I was telling my friend Tony, we were talking about enjoying the views of the mountains around us. I'm like, sometimes I like to climb to the top of the mountain to have a view, and sometimes I like to come up with a ridiculous cockamamie scheme to move the mountain, because that's where you find the interesting people sitting there having that conversation. People like you guys, who I appreciate. I'm blessed to have a wonderful audience, and I feel like it is no accident you've been drawn into us. I mean, the number of people who are get special children, Mensa, gifted programs, Sage. I know a lot of them. I mean, you wouldn't believe the backstories. People wouldn't believe the stories of the people in this group. If I shared with you the backstories, and even my own mods, a lot of times they're going to be like, that stuff can't be true. Well, I don't know. I've seen some things. I'm not saying what is or isn't true, but I take someone at their word unless they give me reason to believe otherwise. And there's a lot of people who've told me crazy stories that have been completely stand up and honest in every other thing. So why would I disbelieve them? Why? Because it keeps from us the things that are more interesting, and it's kept us kind of moving from beyond a certain level. Hey, okay. But in sharing my own little testimony, I am not a super talented science person, although I was the captain of the Science Olympiad team in high school, and we did win the 8th grade Brain Bowl in Arizona in 1995, 96, because my ability to trivia is pretty good. But what was I going to say? I think it's time for us to get out of the corrupt physics of finance and the corrupt physics of a world of material things, and seek a physics that explains our existence. And I think if we do that, we can start thinking of finance differently. For instance, I'll give you an example. Like, we'll talk about the Germans. Everyone likes to talk about World War II, right? The Germans had a real smart idea in World War II coming into it, which was they had their governments own their money. They didn't have debts. They didn't have central banks. They didn't allow someone to leverage against it. And they were able to get rich very quick, and they were able to use that through infrastructure projects to build up real wealth because there was common collective purpose for the people. There were other problems. There were big other problems, but that part of it worked. And that part of it was the same thing that Lincoln tried with the Civil War versus the bankers. And that's probably why they had him assassinated. And you go back into history and see different examples of this. That's why I'm reading. Actually, it was studying money that brought me into this sort of advanced physics realm. And I'll admit, I struggle with it. I mean, I look at it, and I could even show you my YouTube thing. I'm going to be watching a bunch of videos about the propagation of standing waves, because look, I'm in my 40s and I'm a long way from school. Theoretically, this is abstract knowledge, and I'm supposed to sit up there with my wife and just watch funny things and relax. And to be honest, I like doing a lot of that. But we got to do a little bit more than that these days. And so I find myself thinking, are we willing to put things aside to build a community or a set of communities or collaboration where we begin drawing ourselves out, and we give ourselves the ability of collective self-defense, and we share that. And to do that, you need a cultural belief. You need something that holds you together, because you need to keep your Judases out. And you're never going to succeed fully at that, but you got to do something. But I think we have the means, I think we have the talent, and Lord willing, maybe we have the blessing, because I tell you what, I think this week one of two things will happen. Ukraine will surrender, in which case things might taper down a little bit, and then we'll just worry about inflation doom. Or they'll fight to the last. NATO will get drawn into the war because of bleeding hearts, and bleeding hearts will lead to more bleeding hearts, and we'll deal with a war so big that this will all be abstract, and stories like this will be the recounting of a lost civilization that tried to launch itself. Unless we go and we see, kingdom come, which, hey, the Bible says it was about time, and if you look at the period of generations, we're probably about that part of the story. And maybe that's all there is to it. A big part of me, the theological part of me, thinks that way anyway. You guys know that. Those of you who listen on Sunday, and those of you who don't, we're waiting for you. You might as well tune in. It's good stuff. Even if you don't tune in during, consider listening afterwards. It's interesting. You learn a lot. You learn more, I think, from ancient wisdom than you do from modern propaganda. I feel very strongly about that. And that's why on the show, we take time to go back and look at the roads not traveled and the interesting things that were found. Like, I'll give you an example. Do any of you remember, you ever watch those Walt Disney things from the 50s, the kitchen of the future, where they had like a nuclear oven and a nuclear microwave, and you're like, whatever happened to the Jetsons world where things were supposed to get better? And the answer you begin to understand, especially if you start to understand things like Bretton Woods and whatnot, was the decision was made to make people less powerful, to make people less able, to make people less capable, so a few people could have everything for themselves. And it's the exact opposite of the biblical vision of that our job is to take care of others as we take care of ourselves. And if you start to look at why they, hate nuclear power so much, you really start to say, oh, well, the people say because it's a spent nuclear fuel. But if you study it deeper, you start to realize, well, they could recycle that over and over again until there's almost nothing left. So why do, and there's a vulnerability, to be fair, but you start to realize it's because they want an economy of scarcity. They want an economy of suffering. I mean, and people feed off of that. There's a parasitical relationship, and part of it is at being disharmony with God, but part of it also is I believe there are beings that exist at other maybe dimensionalities that feed on us. And it was interesting. I was reading an example of this, and it was talking about how perception is everything. And this goes back to the wave theory, but also goes back to what we experience. Imagine two-dimensional space. For those of you who don't understand, that's a line. And imagine you had a circle that was, let's say, perpendicular to the line, which is to say, if the line is like this, the circle is like this, and the circle's spinning so that it spins, and it has four quadrants. One is red, one is white, one is blue, one is green. So if it's a disc, red, blue, white, green, and it spins. And what you would see is you would see those colors recur along that line if that's all you could see. If you want to feel for this, there's an excellent animation. It'll blow your mind. Probably, watch it. And I think it's called Flatlandia. Or there was a book maybe, but I think someone made an animation of it, which was really cool, if I remember right. You'll have to go look for it. I haven't seen it in years, but it's useful for the concept. And what it says is that a lot of times, what we perceive as reality is a bit like inertial effects of higher dimensional physics. Then that what Farrell was suggesting and what Tesla hints at is that time itself is a third dimensional inertial effect of hyperdimensional physics. Okay, something's happening on a higher level that we can't understand that represent different wave relationships, and that's why things occur on a certain periodicity, where mathematically you can begin to perceive certain things happening on certain schedules and patterns. For instance, what do people say? You look at, was it the 80-year pattern, something like it. It's not exactly 80 years, but 1776, you get the American Revolution. Okay, let's just make it easy. 1780, 1860. Okay, you get the American Civil War. 1940, you get World War II. 2020. Look what's happening in this decade that we're going to go into, either a civil war, that. So there's this recurring thing. And people say, oh, it's the loss of information across a generation. And maybe that's true. I think that's part of it. But I think another part of it is that inasmuch as the Lord constructed this world to reach people, there is a certain set of experiences that happen in a lifetime, and that we experience certain things. There's recurring patterns that are deep, meaningful, and important, that if we could begin to see those patterns, if we could begin to learn those lessons, and we could begin responding to them, we could see them as opportunities to evolve ourselves further along the line of what the Lord intended for us. And what I'm saying to you is that it is my strong belief that people have the ability to understand these things with proper education, but that has been the means by which we have been most controlled. I spend a lot of time reading history books written between 1850 and 1950. And the quality of the writing, the depth of the ideas, the import of what was being discussed is light years in most, except for a few technical areas beyond what we discuss today. The deliberate dumbing down, where people are not looking for big answers, but they're looking for big escapes, is part of the attack and the war against our species, where we are being made into less and less, where we are becoming more flesh, And even in Atlantis, if you were to believe the old myths, I mean, Plato talked about this, that people, actually what he said was the admixture of people came such that the spirit was lost and that we just became flesh. And that we see that temptation being forced upon us, pushed upon us. And yet we still have, as Descartes would have said, we have this ladder we can pull upon where we are lower than angels, but yet we may reach above and be higher if we could just climb that. And I'm saying to you, fellow Pinelanders, I think we need to start climbing. The answer isn't to the left or right. We both understand that. The answer isn't really forward or backward. I mean, the history of trying to rebuild what was done before, it's interesting as a mythology. It's fine. And looking forward, I think we got to keep our eyes in front of us to be aware of what's there. But we got to start climbing, friends. We got to figure a way over some of these obstacles. And we have to figure that by learning what was stolen from us. And I think, honestly, that's where Pineland begins. Because I don't pretend to know all the answers of what's true and what's not true. I don't know. I have had people who are more experienced and capable than I in certain areas help take the time to explain to me certain things. And it has led me to believe quite strongly that with a modicum of effort and commitment, we can do greater things. And that if we commit to an escape from the path that we are being led upon, that there will be opportunities and there will be opposition too. They do not want this happening, and we have to be very careful who we pick we help. Um, but if we ask the Lord's blessing and we seek to discover something closer to the intent He had for us, and that whatever that may prove to be in the fullness of thing, in accordance with biblical wisdom, the handbook He gave us to help, what we know is that our elites hate us. They want us dead. They want us poor. They want us not nurtured, not well fed. They lead us into all these traps and tricks, and then they promise they're going to take care of us if only we treat them as gods. And they use us. And we don't deserve that. We deserve freedom. Um, and not in some pithy way of putting some new stuffed suit in top, but freedom has to mean a large degree of autonomy for the individual. And it has to mean an unrelenting cultural focus on truth. And it has to mean a servant's heart, too. It's, it's crazy. Let's see. Free Green writes, if you can see the world at other frequencies you can't see with ultraviolet or infrared, then you will see everything that runs the world. I believe you, man. I believe you. I mean, one day you and I, I'm sure, will have a very good conversation, and I am looking forward to one where I can listen. People always expect me to do the talking. I'm tired of talking. I mean, I am having a hard time doing a show this morning, a little bit. That's why I came on this way, because I'm reading and I'm trying to understand, because I'm not very good at surviving in this day-to-day world because I don't think that way, and it's harder, even paying bills, how do you make money? I'm not good at that because I just don't care. Need to care. I mean, by the way, if you want to help me pay my bills so I can do interesting ruminations like this, please support the program. P.O. Box 343, Eagle Lake, Maine, 04739. At least to get us over the gap, and the Venmo CVC PRV. Thank you. I know everyone's tight and pray. I mean, the Lord will take care of us one way or another. I need to get one of those free electricity devices soon, because I tell you what, that's this big thing. I know at least two different people who have seen their electricity bill, and I'm one of them, jump 300% here in Maine. It's crazy. And with these electrical costs, I mean, if we want to have a change in it, but not to make it a product to sell, but rather an understanding of a different way of life. They always cheapen the advancements. And it's not about worshiping power. It's not about that, but it's about using that as the core of something different and finding that discovery and putting it to good use. And it's a different way of thinking at the world. But what we have to understand is the world is about harmonics and leverage, not just about raw power. We have to really understand the means unto the ends. And that's what I always say I come up with these pithy lines. People say I'm good with sentences, and I am good with words. That we're looking for a way to change things, and that we're looking for the means to do it, and that we're not just, and a lot of times when we look at that, we're like, oh, we'll come up with something clever, make money and do this. We got to get to a point where money doesn't work the way it does anymore, where money isn't what decides our civilization, because money is so corrosive. Its very amorality is the destruction of us into a material. Amorality is the, how should I say, amorality is the philosophical embrace of materialism, and materialism is the destruction of the spiritual being. I've tried very hard over a lot of years to get certain right-wing people to understand. They're like, well, I don't make my moral judgments based on my money. I'm like, the hell you don't. You always make your moral judgments based on your money, because what happens is you say to other people, well, so long as they're not interfering with my money, I don't have to care. And it's that materialism and monetism, if you want to put it that way, I don't know if that's the right word, but has a way of making us disconnected into insular entities. And we can't do that anymore. We have to learn to reconnect to one another. For a very long time, we've been bad at that. And we have to find things on which we can connect. And that, we need to be the foundations of something that look upward instead of being tribes smacking one another in the head. And that's my hope. I don't know how we get there, but I know that's what Pineland needs to accomplish. And, if we get, a big piece of land somewhere and we get some people who can be there and we get some people who will fund it and maybe we figure out some of these things. We start small. We start from the beginning. We start by understanding what we don't know. I mean, and if it starts as simple as turbines and all that, we build it up. We build the thing up and we get out and we give ourselves the ability to stay out. And, that's what's needed. That's autonomy. And autarky will allow us, and then we can choose to survive. And the rest of the world can go crazy, but we will just need to be able to protect ourselves from them. I mean, you read about God and his people, and, I talk about that a lot on Sundays, and, you guys don't always come in there, but if you have the right people and you're following God, nothing on this world can hurt you. And I really believe that if you seek his ways, if you seek his wisdom, and you understand that. And why does it happen that we get hurt? Because we walk astray. We walk in our own path. And I'm hoping we find that other path. That's what I want to do. And I think the answers are amongst us here. The people at the top are so caught fighting for the world that they're going to die for a dying substance. I'm not fighting for the forces of entropy. I'm fighting to live. And the journey doesn't start with death. It starts with the new day and the others you awaken to it. That's what the Lord teaches. And in that, we awaken something in ourselves, I like to believe, too. Something that can be more. And I just ask the Lord to guide us and to lead us as we figure this thing out. And we figure this out because we do understand the world. The natural laws of a world made by the Lord do apply. And so we could talk about all the horrible things. And I'll come on here and scare you. That's fine. It's what I do. I'm good at it. But I'm going to take a little time off, too, in the next couple weeks if things don't fall apart, because we need some solutions. You all understand, at a minimum, if nothing else changes, inflation is going to wreck the West. In a divided, multipolar world where the dollar doesn't rule, we will not be able to be the beneficiaries of the elite's control over others. We have been their middlemen here in the West for a very long time. And one can argue persuasively we were co-opted in that our real wealth was transformed into financial wealth, which gave us for a time material status at the expense of trading in our collateral. But that has basically exhausted itself. And you can see that in the broken down rust mills, of the Midwest, where I spent a lot of years, the middle of my life. And that's not coming back. They don't want it back. They don't need it back. And the reason they don't care is they're like, oh, well, we'll have free electricity on the other side of this. They know these technologies. They invested. What do you think all that DARPA money went into? I mean, even Biden's like, we need ARPANET and all that. And they're trying to figure out what genetics they want to save and what genetics they want to destroy and who they want to resonate and all that. But we don't know that. We can just help each other. And that's what I want to do from here on in. So, people talk about a great awakening, and they make this so ecumenical. And I'm sure God wants everyone to survive. I have no doubt of that. But it doesn't mean that there isn't truth. And an awakening that doesn't seek truth and that is willing to be accepting and tolerant of all things, the awakening isn't just about love for one another. It's about understanding God's vision for us. And that's why theology was once understood as the queen of sciences, because it understood that there was more to the world than material. I mean, even mathematics understands that. The most interesting numbers are imaginary. The square root of -1. You can pick ones. The formulas you look at for how cubes work. These things that go in and out, and they draw things. I mean, it's a hint of 0-point energy, that there is something out there. And it's really one of the things you start to understand, too. That, even I was reading in Farrell's book, he was talking about the sun. One of the reasons why the sun puts out more energy than it would if it was just nuclear explosions and blow itself up. It's a gyroscope that's literally sucking energy in from somewhere else to provide light to us. And so if it gets lighter or darker, you start to realize that the physics by which we understand our world is incomplete. And God bless that it is. So we have new visions to discover, new fields to walk down, ones that have been forbidden us. And so we all have to get smarter now. And we all have to do it. And you know what? Just in the same way Christ taught complex spiritual wisdom through metaphors, we're going to have to figure this out. I'm going to have to bring out Twizzlers to work like jump ropes to try to explain this, because I'm not that smart. The reason I'm good at explaining things as simple metaphors is because I'm good at understanding simple metaphors. And hopefully more of us can do that. I'm grateful for those of you in this community who are helping with that. And we've moved away, I think, from the idea of simple ideologies or things like that. The focus is better. And it gives me a little bit of hope. And it's good I need hope, because today I got to make calls with a bunch of people who are all they're going to do is say, I want this, I want that. And it's just like, I don't want that. I just want some people. I mean, you know what happiness is? It's friends sitting around a fire talking about the big things and the little things, appreciating one another, appreciating families. And we can't do that anymore because we spend all of our damn time. Our time is stolen from us, our energy, our psychic trauma is enforced upon us to live in a world that doesn't serve us. Why? So we can have little green bills? So we can be predicted into certain patterns so we can be shuffled? I don't want that anymore. And I think the one thing that's encouraging, people wouldn't take it as such, is the great replacement, the great walkout too. All of these things that people are saying, we're just not going to be a party to this anymore. We want something different. So let's choose something different. And for those of you who are part of this program, you guys know who you are because you'll be listening. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to help some people. And I don't know the answers. I don't have to know the answers. Pray for it. So I think that's what I got for today. Not a lot of news in today's program. The same problems continue. Nothing is better. Nothing's probably going to get better. Except maybe we will. So God bless. Just pray the Lord's blessing upon each of you. Heavenly Father, just please help lead us on a path that's pleasing to you. Thy will be done. In Jesus' mighty name. Amen. You guys have a good day. I'll be in the Telegram chat quite a bit today. I've got to go shovel my own weight in snow. I'm sure the wife wants some breakfast, and I hear the hens are producing more. So if you ever come visit, by the way, if you ever find yourself in northern Maine, say hi. I have eggs to give out. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's necessarily the best economic structure I've ever set up at, but hey, you know what? We have the ability to survive, and one day there's things that are worth what's the old proverb? All that glitters is not gold. There are more valuable things in this. God bless you guys. Have a good one. Keep safe. Bye-bye.